so many men create their sense of value by measuring how well they've done with women in life. How many times they've been laid, if they've been laid, how many girlfriends they've had, if they've had girlfriends, have they been married? So I see guys who don't feel they're good enough because they've never had a girlfriend, or they've never had sex, so they must not be good enough, or they haven't had enough sex, or not enough sex with enough pretty women. We find these things to measure ourselves that are absolutely inconsequential, but we're just sure they're proof of our worth or lack of worth.
If you say those things to yourself enough times, you'll end up believing that they're true. And then after a while, they just become part of you. And you're not even believing it anymore. It's like the physics of your system.
Yeah. Psychologically, the world will be as we believe the world to be.
Why do you think so many guys subjugate their needs?
We've been taught to, and we inaccurately internalized, ironically, that was the best way to get our needs met. I mean, think about it. If you're a small child, infant, and you don't have a lot of thinking, processing power, just survival power, and let's say you quickly come to the awareness that the caretakers in your life are not real competent. They don't respond timely. They don't respond consistently. They don't respond with what you really need. And so what you learn is, well, maybe if I get rid of my needs, or maybe if I become needless and wantless. I mean, this isn't thought, it's just emotional survival reaction. If I take care of their needs, if I make sure they're okay, then they'll be okay to make sure I'm okay. And all of this begins before we can even think about it. So it gets wired into our nervous system, then we grow up to be children, adolescents, adults, and we just keep following the same thing that got wired in when, very inaccurately, when we were just a few months old.
Isn't it strange to think that we can rail against the world not giving us the things that we want? Meanwhile, we don't make the things that we want a priority.
Well, that's a big piece I've worked on, and I work with men, and that's a really big piece. I used to do things like not tell anybody what my needs and wants were, or even hide them, or I'd still at times make it difficult for people to give to me. I've been told by many people in my life that I'm difficult to give to. So I consciously work at that. Another piece with the men I work with, I call nice guys, is, again, they believe they're bad for having needs. Everybody else's needs are more important. And here again, the kind of the distorted logic that a lot of us use. I've done this. A lot of guys do this, women do it too, is they'll go find a person whose life is a mess. They can't pay their own bills. They can't hold a job. They fight with everybody they know. They're depressed, whatever. And we think, I can fix them up. I'll dedicate all my resources to getting them good. And then once they're good, they'll be there for me. They'll help me get my needs met. But that's just terrible. Terrible strategy. If you want to get your needs met, go find people who are already competent at getting their own needs met and who are available to help give to you. But again, most of the stuff is so unconscious, we're not thinking about it. We just keep doing the same thing, hoping at some point it will work. And then again, often when people then do try to give to us, no, that's okay. It's all right. No, it doesn't matter.
The minimization.
No. So, this is a big piece I've been working on in my own life.
Yeah, there's something, I think, especially for guys, that seems kind of like romantically heroic about, I don't need anybody or anything. Yeah. I can make this work on my own. There's something kind of not desperate, but tangential to desperate and needy about having needs. And I think the reverse of that, of maybe if you tell people what you want, sometimes they'll give it to you. Reframing that so that it's something which is aspirational to do, I think is a hurdle that many guys may struggle to get over.
Talk about that dynamic with men. Because again, I've been working with men for 30 years. And a really core pattern I see is just this pattern of going it alone, isolating themselves. Mm-hmm. Another way I put it is so many men, and especially the younger men, millennials, generation below, they grew up with the internet. And it's like that's all they need. They hang out. I call it they hang out in the nursery. Nothing's required of them. Nothing's demanded of them. They get all their connections on social media, spend all their time on the internet, binging on Netflix, playing World of Warcraft, smoking dope, drinking, jerking off to porn. And that's their life. And to actually go connect with other real life human beings who could actually nurture them, fill their bucket, give them social connection, it feels like they'd have to give up too much. They have to give up all this other stuff over here that consumes them. And maybe even I think there's a fear that they might even have to reveal too much of themselves and reveal how shallow and empty and non-productive their lives really are. And so they just keep doing the same thing.
Yeah, when you're siloed off, no one is peering in to look at exactly how are you spending your day and exactly what do you think and when do you get out of bed. You've got this great quote where you say your mind would rather manage old and familiar anxieties than confront new and unknown ones. And I think that's exactly what you're talking about.
That's just a given. You know, the devil you know is better than the devil you don't know. And for so many men, I liken it to, I call it an emotional tree fort. I don't know where you grew up if you had trees around you, but we had trees, we had tree forts. And, you know, the ideal perfect day is if, you know, you or one of your buddies found somebody's dad's Playboy magazine or whatever, Hustler, Penthouse, whatever, and you go up in the tree fort, pull the ladder up, nobody can find you, and you can just be all by yourself and do whatever you want. And it's kind of like a lot of men just continue that mentality of just wanting to live in that emotional tree fort where they pull the ladder up. Nobody can track them. Nobody knows what they're up to. They don't have to get real, accountable, vulnerable with anybody. And then we wonder why, you know, statistically, you read how many men are isolated, lonely, depressed, the tolls that it takes on us physically, emotionally, early death. Well, now is men, you know, men going their own way, incels, just, you know, they're just, you know, just saying, hey, we're advertising it now. We're in the club of guys that basically aren't in a club.
Yeah, they self-ID in their isolation.
Yeah, exactly. It becomes their identity. And then it also then becomes easier to blame somebody, something outside of you, whether it's women, society, culture, feminism, you know, whatever. Well, let's blame them for my isolation. And I was at a retreat this weekend with about 40 men, and I spoke to them about this. And, you know, if I had to pull a number out of my ass, I'd say, you know, maybe 80% of the isolated, lonely men are isolated by choice, not because they've lost a partner, not because they've had an accident or an illness or a major financial setback. It's by choice. It's their preference. And then all the while wonder why they can't get love, can't get laid, you know, can't get a promotion at work, don't have any friends. It seems to be a voluntary place to be.
I understand why guys have a skepticism and a retreat from the world around them, though. It's not to say that they can't overcome it themselves and that the agency is in their hands to fix the problem. But I do think that a lot of guys feel like their challenges are being dismissed by the whining of a privileged class that they themselves don't actually feel like they're a part of. That, you know,
it is so ironic how all the projections out there of who's actually privileged in our culture. And, you know, you have men saying, well, you know, now women and minorities and immigrants are privileged, and the women and minorities and immigrants go, those white guys are privileged. And, you know, I've really never found where blame or pointing fingers resolves much of anything or gets you anywhere.
Yes. That being said, if you are a guy that is struggling and isolated and alone and doesn't have many connections, hearing that the world out there considers you to have some sort, like you're the original oppressor.
Yeah, exactly.
You know,
I get it.
You are the OG
the patriarchy.
Yeah, of course. You are the OG oppressor. That is going to encourage you to check out. It's like, hey, I'm suffering.
It's an excuse. You can use it as a great excuse.
Correct. Yes. Yeah. It legitimates your prize already. Okay. So how can people better learn to make their needs a priority? How do you start doing that?
I began by giving to myself. Years ago, I was in therapy. I was married to my second wife, who I was married to when I wrote No More Mr. Nice Guy. And it became obvious that I was operating by what I call covert contracts, giving to get. If I do this for you, then you'll do this for me. I won't have to say it out loud. Won't have to ask. Won't have to be clear or direct. You'll just read my mind because I gave you, and now you're going to give to me. And so when I was working with a therapist, I was in a men's group at that time, I made a year-long commitment that I would no longer give gifts, surprises, anything to anybody else other than my children. So, like, if I was at the mall, I thought, "Oh, my wife would like that." I if I had any impulse to give to somebody else, I had to give something to me.
Okay.
Not necessarily equal, but it was a way of reversing an old paradigm, an old pattern. I was just so reflexively giving to everybody else, and in the midst of doing that, the people in my life felt the strings attached. I didn't realize I was giving to get, giving to approval, or to get approval, giving for them to give me back. And then when they did try to give to me, I wouldn't let them, right? So I had to start giving with me. So that's where it had to begin. I had to say, okay, what do I want? What's my priorities? What's important to me? I'd go in the mall and there'd be a jacket on sale, and I haven't bought myself a jacket in a while, and I'd buy myself a jacket. Uh, I'd pay for my kids to go to the dentist or the orthodontist, and I thought, it's been a few years since I've been to the dentist. So I thought, I need to go to the dentist. So, all the way from just basic healthcare kind of things, and I continue to this day, wear a ring that tracks my sleep. I try to give to me by getting enough sleep.
Mhm.
I just hired a nutrition coach. I want to, I want to be around another 20, 30 years and have a fit body and fit mind. And I thought, "Oh, I got to give to me. I got to eat well." I told my fitness coach, but I don't want to track macros. I'm tracking macros. I got the app.
You can't get around it.
Yeah. So whether it's giving to ourselves and just those basic fundamental, get enough exercise, get enough sleep, eat healthy, spend time socially connecting with other people, save money, go to the dentist, whether it's those basic things or just, ordering yourself some new clothes, say, I'm going to go hang out with
Prioritizing
friends.
yourself first.
Prioritizing self. Now, I know people already listening to this going, but that's just selfish. That's just fundamentally selfish. What if everybody lived that way? And I think if everybody lived that way, we'd probably be a lot better off because we wouldn't be, walking around from this place of emptiness and neediness and manipulating people to try to value us or give to us. And if our bucket is full and overflowing, we have so much more to give to everybody else. I, like a lot of people, for a long time was trying to give from an empty bucket. My bucket was bone dry.
Mhm.
Not only did I didn't fill it, but I didn't let anybody else help me fill it.
So if you're not caring for yourself, if you're not doing the things that makes you whole, you then look to other people to fill something that you could have done already. You are an empty vessel. You come to fix me. However, I'm not going to tell you that I need you to fix me, and I'm not going to fix me, and then I'm going to become resentful of you and me for me being empty.
That's probably the definition of neediness right there. And and this is when I'm talking with people about how to get their needs met. The first thing that guys will say, well, will that make me needy? That repulses women, right? No, making your needs a priority does not make you needy. Not making your needs a priority, walking around with an empty bucket with this big vacuum hose that you try to hook up to other people to get them to meet your needs, that's neediness. And that's what, people kind of go like this to. So we all have needs. And to just acknowledge, I have needs. And again, guys want, well, what's the difference between a need and a want? I go, don't go there. If you want it, great. If you need it, great. But make yourself a priority. And we're, kind of bringing this back around. And more pieces to this, but really good book. I've been recommending it, it seems like a lot lately because it's an old book that a lot of the younger generation hasn't discovered, but it's a book called The Road Less Traveled by Dr. M. Scott Peck, a psychiatrist. He's passed away. I'm told it is the all-time best-selling self-help book, and it's been around well over 30-something years. Back when I was a minister, I even preached sermons from it many, many, many years ago. You're smiling. Oh, minister, we'll go there. And I brought up in a Christian church that says, put yourself last,
Subjugate your desires.
Yeah. I can tell you some stories about that. So Scott Peck says that if parents are meeting their own needs, are attentive to their children, responding to their children's needs in timely, judicious, and I add consistent ways, children at a young age emotionally internalize a belief, I'm valuable, I'm lovable, my needs are important, and the world is like my family. Now, can you imagine going off to preschool, kindergarten, Think, I'm lovable. I'm valuable. My needs are important. And kindergarten is going to be just like my family, or junior high. I'm lovable. I'm valuable. My needs are important. And everybody in junior high is going to be just like my family. If we operated that in the world, can you imagine how our lives would be so significantly different? We just had internalized belief. I'm valuable. I'm lovable. My needs are important. And of course, most of us did not get that to a significant degree. We maybe got the opposite. And unfortunately, another piece that can get added in if you don't get that is that if your parents are not meeting your needs in timely, judicious, consistent ways, they may tell you they love you 100 times a day. But if they're not meeting your needs, you don't internalize that emotional belief. But if they're not meeting your needs and you get called up maybe even to take care of a parent, you get parentified. Like for me, I liked sports. And so my father got a lot of pride out of his son, being good in sports. And my mother, lived through me to be the good man that my father was. So I was parentified by both of my parents. Then a child internalizes the belief, I'm not good enough. Because you think I should be able to fill mom up and make her not depressed and make her happy.
Mm-hmm.
I should be able to satisfy, dad in this way. And so you internalize that belief. Now you got the beliefs of I'm not valuable or lovable. My needs aren't important. I'm not good enough. And the world is like my family. That's how most people approach the world. So here's my theory. My theory, if Scott Peck's theory is accurate, and I believe it has value, and maybe our minds aren't as receptive and elastic and plastic as they were when we were infants, our brains are still plastic. And we can still rewrite, overwrite our basic operating system, that machine language. And so I believe that we're actually going to make the world a better place, be more loving, accept more love, if we can start making our needs a priority in that way that Scott Peck talks about. Okay, it's not our parents' jobs anymore. It's our job. So our job is, number one, when we can, fill our own bucket up. Number two, surround ourselves with people who want to help us fill our bucket up and create what I call cooperative reciprocal relationships. Everybody in the relationship is there because they choose to be. It's cooperative and it's reciprocal. Everybody gets value. That can be a friendship. It can be a family member, a buddy. It can be a professional cooperative. You and I have a cooperative reciprocal relationship. We're both here because we choose to be. We both get value out of it. And our lives are better because we have this time together. And if we can fill our lives up with that, I believe we can also internalize the emotional belief, not just a mantra, oh, I'm good enough, I'm lovable, but an emotional belief in our nervous system at the core, I'm lovable and valuable, my needs are important, I'm good enough, and the world sees that, and the world's going to respond to that. I think that then lets us be much more loving and giving to the world around us, and much more receptive to all that the world, the universe, the cosmos wants to give us.
I'm interested in taking that step from just tactical things, which are a great foundation. If I'm going to give to somebody else, have you given to yourself recently? Probably a good idea. Yeah. That's something that's tactical. Learning to clearly and fairly state when something makes you feel good or makes you feel bad. Probably a good way of setting boundaries and reinforcing behavior that you want from people around you. All of these things, tactically very useful at a high level. But the deeper stage of this, of unpicking the texture of your system, as you're talking about, like the emotional response that you have, as opposed to just creating this odd lattice work of band-aids that you've placed over the top of it to somehow be able to operate in a functional way from a dysfunctional foundation. Right. What are the steps of getting deeper? How much can we unpick those patterns that we've developed from even pre-verbally? And what are the steps that you like to get people to go through?
Well, number one, I don't know. There's about 3 or 4 questions there. I don't know. I don't know how much we can rewrite. I know we can rewrite some. People will come to me and say, Robert, how long will this take for me to get to X, Y, or Z? I don't know. I'm still on that journey. I haven't gotten there yet. I'm still learning. I'll let you know once I find out. Probably a lifetime. So if we do anything, if there's anything about the human mind and the human nervous system, it likes predictability. It likes the sameness, kind of going back to that quote that you read earlier. We like the ghetto we know. even if it's, it's a ghetto, but it's a ghetto we know. And, to leave that ghetto and go out into the world where I don't know what language they speak. I don't know what their rules are. We'll just stay where we are. But countless people throughout time have decided to challenge themselves, whether through religious, spiritual practice, yogic practice, challenging themselves to make more money, challenge themselves to get into shape, whatever. No matter how we challenge ourselves, our nervous system, our mind, our body is going to resist. It wants to hold on to the familiar neural pathways, those neural goat paths that we've been down, the muscle memory that we've just created before we could think and reason. Okay, that's normal. That's why coaching is valuable. That's why therapy is valuable. That's why 12-step groups are valuable. That's why, having mentors is valuable. It's because if we're going to do it on our own, we'll probably keep, stumbling and bumping into hurdles and brick walls, and we'll quit. We'll give up. But if we can make this journey with others who either are on a similar journey or who've already been further down the road, when our emotional dissonance, our cognitive dissonance, our physical dissonance, when our reaction comes in, we have accountability, we have support. We don't have to go through it alone. Because, for example, I like to be in shape, but I've never been a gym rat, and I've never been, one of those people that's just diehard, got to get to the gym every day. And so, I've learned it's better if I don't say, I'm going to lose X amount of weight in this amount of time, or I'm going to go to the gym this many times. Because as soon as I set like a commitment to myself that's out of my normal habit pattern, I almost always about a week or two later catch myself gone the other direction without even being aware, right? Just a few examples. When I was going through my second divorce and I was in my late 40s, living alone for the first time in my adult life, I started going to a 12-step group, a few of them actually, just to have a support system, just to have a men's group. And, they got a lot of platitudes in 12 steps, and one of them was about having an attitude of gratitude. So I thought, going through a divorce, my life's in turmoil, my first book's just about to be published, my son's a senior in high school. My life was it just felt upside down. And so a buddy I met in this 12-step group, I said, let's start a gratitude practice. Every morning, first thing when we get up, every night before we get in bed, let's just think of 30 seconds, 4, 5, 6, 10 things we feel grateful for. And we'll check in with each other. Both of us started this. 4 or 5 days in, I was just feeling amazing. I was going through all these changes, struggles, difficulties, and I was feeling good because I was doing this gratitude practice. And about the 5th day, I forgot to do it. And so did my buddy. And we probably both went about 2 or 3 days before it dawned on us, wait a minute, we haven't been doing that gratitude practice. It felt good. Both of us were liking it, and we just forgot. That's that emotional cognitive dissonance of where our nervous system wants to just keep things homeostatic, keep things in a familiar pathway. And so now if I am going to make a significant commitment, I do have to surround myself with people, and I have to check in. I decided end of last year, I thought, I've always thought it's a good idea to meditate. I've tried. I always thought I get uncomfortable sitting cross-legged on this cushion, and can I not have any thought? And so a guy I knew, I said, would you coach me in meditation? He lives on Michael Singer's compound in Florida. And so I thought if he's living there, he probably, is into meditation. And so he did. So we started every day. We check in. We just came up with a plan first thing in the morning. And so that's probably been 4 or 5 months now. And I've only missed 3 days of meditation because we checked in every day. We connected with each other. One day it was late at night. I thought, I'm going to miss a day. And I thought, fuck it. I don't want this to be ego driven. I'm going to do it because I want to do it. So I missed it. I didn't try to squeeze it in the end of the day. And I have found out there's an interesting mathematics to this. If I do the meditation early in the morning, first thing of the day, I don't miss it. It goes on the calendar. I take a snapshot. I wait till later, I can get push, and I forget about it. Same thing, wanting to be healthy and fit. Okay, I've hired a fitness coach. And so, and we check in regularly, and I'm putting things in, my Fitness Pal, and I'm doing all that stuff. that is how we change those old patterns. It takes consistency over time. I know in the self-help world, there's this thing, 21 days to change a habit. I don't know who in the fuck thought that up. I've never changed a habit in 21 days. I think if you've had something in your nervous system, in my case, 60-something years, it ain't going away in 21 days, but I'm okay with that. I can be the noticer, because when you decide, okay, I'm going to eat this way, or I'm going to exercise this way, or I'm going to practice gratitude this way, or meditate this way, now you become the observer of self. You notice when you have the impulse to go eat this thing that, you're not eating, or skip the day at the gym, or not meditate. You notice the pattern coming up. And then again, if you have a support system, you just check in and then just pick it up again tomorrow. So it's not rocket science, but it is challenging.
How can we stop our ruminating brains? You mentioned there about when you posit an ideal, you then begin to compare yourself to that ideal. And a lot of the time you start to fall short. And I think lots of people, especially high performers, personal developers, self-growthers, will have a very scolding inner voice.
Yeah, I watch those interviews and I'm going, oh my goodness, I'd hate to be inside his head.
Yeah.
But we put them on pedestals, the high performers, the worship of Navy SEALs, all this stuff that especially we men do in this culture. And most of them are driven by a lot of demons, by a lot of voices in their head. And maybe you can relate to that as well. I fortunately don't, I can ruminate as well as the next person, but fortunately, I don't have that critical voice generally. My mind it keeps me safe. I just don't launch into bigger and things that the unknown. But I don't have a highly critical voice, but I work with a lot of people that do. I think every woman I've been married to has had that. My father did. It is maybe one of my superpowers to kind of help calm the people down. But I have a whole course that I call the ruminating brain. And my theory about ruminating brain is that I think for many people, it's an inherited trait, that you don't have to look far in the family tree to see mom, dad, sibling, grandparents, aunts, uncles with some manifestation of this rumination kind of pattern. You see depression, anxiety, suicides oftentimes, addictive issues, relationship struggles, abuse. And so I think it's a brain type that you inherit. Like studies have shown you can inherit brain types that predispose you to addictions, to ADHD, and ruminating brain. And I found those three things often go together. I've got so many buddies that are recovering addicts, and most all of them acknowledge they have ADHD, and most all of them acknowledge they have a ruminating brain. So I think there's something genetically inherited of those traits. Now, the ruminating brain can also be caused by trauma. That's what PTSD does. It can create ruminations. It can lead to depression. But what the ruminating brain typically does, and brains don't actually ruminate, but it's like there's this constant spinning, like there's a washing machine agitating all the time, and you're inside the washing machine. And I found that there's three directions ruminating brains tend to go. They can go into the past and just rehash every perceived mistake, missed opportunity, regret. And if you replay the same regret 15,000 times, you're going to feel like a real loser. You're going to feel like there's something fundamentally wrong with you. And I think even going back to these isolated men we were talking about earlier, I suspect a lot do have ruminating brains. Because if you're going in the past and just rehashing, I blew that opportunity. How come I didn't talk to her? How come I didn't get her number? How come I broke up with her? How come I stayed with her? I was teaching when I taught this course live a few years ago, and a guy who's probably about my age, he was in his 50s or 60s, still ruminating about a missed sexual opportunity in college, still beating himself up. So again, the mind creates this illusion that it's just gathering important information. It's important that I keep going back and rehashing, re-looking at this stuff because there's something I missed, something I need to know. But all you really do is you just end up feeling worse and worse and worse about yourself. So the other thing that people do in that backward looking is they create I call it revisionist history. Other people call it like castles in the sky. We go back and replay these events and we say, if I just done X, Y, or Z, then my life would have gone down this path and this. If I just had slept with her when I had that chance in college, my whole life would be radically different. But it's not true. We'd still probably be ruminators, and we'd still be ruminating about all missed opportunities. But we believe that revisionist history is highly likely, could be possible, and it's not what we're living now. So now we feel terrible. So here's another way then that our ruminating brain beats us up. It measures us and compares us. Maybe it measures us against just any arbitrary standard. Well, I should be a millionaire by this. I should be married by this time. I should have slept with 100 women by this time. I should have launched my program by this time. Or, oh, look, he's my age and Bill Gates is the same age as me and graduated from high school in the same city as me, the same year. And, what if I compared myself to Bill Gates, in terms of at least financial success? I mean, I'd be miserable if I actually took that seriously. So there's that comparison and the measurement, almost always finding ourselves lacking and being less than in some fundamental, significant way. That's one reason I'm not a big fan of this bow down and worship the high achiever thing that we're so caught up in. 10x your life, 10x this, you could be doing better, you could be making more, you could be doing that, you could be a Navy SEAL, you could be that. I think all it does is just fuel that I'm not good enough. I'm not good enough. And we know we're not going to attain that, but we think we should in order to be good enough. And so then the third way that the ruminating brain goes is into the future. This is where your perfectionism comes in. If I don't do it perfectly, it's going to crash, it's going to burn. What if I fail? What if I look foolish? What if I invest in it and I lose everything I've got? With my luck, everything's going to crash and burn. Oh, everything's okay now, but it's only a matter of time until everything goes south, goes tits up, and everything just, So what happens if you've got that going on in your head? And most ruminators maybe do all three of those, go in the past, go in the future, do the measure and compare, but most do one significantly more than the other. And the three things it tends to do to you: it keeps you stuck, because if you're just ruminating about the past, trying to figure out every possible pathway forward before you take any action, research everything to death, all that, you're not going to take action, so you're going to stay stuck. You're going to stay isolated. There's that isolated thing, because you don't want people to find out, because if you're ruminating in all these negative ways, your odds are not going to feel really good about yourself. And you don't want to let people get close to you because you're afraid they're going to find out what you already believe to be true. So, and you're going to feel really bad about yourself. Because again, if you rehash the same mistakes enough times, if you miss enough opportunities because it took you too long to make a decision, if you compare and measure yourself enough, you'll find enough people doing better than you. You're just going to feel fundamentally flawed. And it just goes on and on. But thankfully, there is there is good news. And I teach people a combination of both mindfulness and cognitive behavioral therapy. But it's as simple as, how can we step out of the washing machine and watch it spin rather than be in it, being spun by it? So the primary mantra of what I teach people, the ruminating brain, is practice being the observer, not the believer of our thoughts. Unfortunately, if we've thought something for long enough, a belief is nothing but an oft-repeated thought. If you've thought that thought enough times, you're convinced it's true. It doesn't matter what our belief is. It could be religious belief, political belief, belief about ourselves, belief about women, belief about the world. If you think it enough, and if you find enough other supporting evidence through confirmation bias, of course, it must be true. And so stepping out of that machine and watching it going, it sure still seems true that I'm, so many men create their sense of value by measuring how well they've done with women in life. How many times they've been laid, if they've been laid, how many girlfriends they've had, if they've had girlfriends, how, have they been married, or how many times have they been married and I've crossed the line that now. So I see guys who don't feel they're good enough because they've never had a girlfriend, or they've never had sex, so they must not be good enough, or they haven't had enough sex, or not enough sex with enough pretty women, or, you know, they haven't had I talking to somebody the other day, all my relationships ended about 2 years. So he's judging himself for that. I was on a call with 2 podcasters, and you know, me and the other 2 guys all work with people around relationships. And one guy said, well, I'm not in a relationship right now. So I kind of have this thing. How can I teach people? The other guy says, well, I met my wife in high school, and that's the only one I've ever been with. How can I teach people? And I go, I've been divorced 3 times. How can I teach people? And so it's funny how we find these things to measure ourselves that are absolutely inconsequential, but we're just sure they're proof of our worth or lack of worth.
It's so interesting. It's the Michael Singer influence there of you are not your thoughts, you're the observer of your thoughts, being able to sort of step away and see that washing machine going on. I think so many of the thought patterns that people engage in regularly, the stories that they tell themselves, the little sort of like reverse mantras that they have, not something that's positive and encourages
Usually
them,
not at all,
but something which is negative and reinforces a fear that they have or an insufficiency that they're concerned about or whatever. You're right. If you say those things to yourself enough times, you'll end up believing that they're true. And then after a while, they just become part of you and you're not even believing it anymore. It's like the physics of your system.
Yeah. You know, whether you do a dive into like Joe Dispenza type quantum physics, you know, pick the path you want. Psychologically, the world will be as we believe the world to be. We will be in the world as we believe ourselves. It goes back to, you know, what we internalize at a young age. So if you believe the world is X, Y, Z, that's what you're going to see. You're only going to see examples of that, and you won't see all the things that might contradict those beliefs.
Just 2 bits there. First off, the way that the reticular activating system actually works is precisely by that. It's why when you buy a new car, you're like, has every 10th fucking person got this same car?
Exactly.
Like, why? No, it's
and the same color.
You're now looking for it,
Yeah.
right? It's the same reason as to why they do experiments where they tell people to pick all of the things that were red in a room and then say, and how many things were blue? And they go, I have no idea. It's like, well, no, because you weren't looking for the things that were blue. You were looking for the things that were red. So
have you heard the one about the gorilla?
yes, where they get
They're passing the basketballs back
how many
and forth?
times did they pass the basketball? And did you notice the gorilla that came through the middle of the
Gorilla?
screen? No one noticed the gorilla that came through the middle of the screen. Yeah, of course. So the way that the reticular activating system works, you actually do, from a sort of sensory interpretation perspective, you blot out the things that you're not looking for. And if you are looking for a reason as to why you are a loser, or why you are not worthy, or why people don't like you, or why the world doesn't care whether you live or die, or you're inferior to other people, or they're more successful, or they've got more friends, or they're going to make more money, or whatever it is, you will observe, like global confirmation bias, you will find things that reinforce that belief.
Easily.
So from the sort of reticular activating system.
And now the internet will feed that to you as well.
Of course, because you actually have algorithms that pick out that. They realize that you spent 0.5 seconds longer on all of the negative news stories than the positive ones, or on the ones that are aspirational about dudes that have got 3% body fat and are 220 pounds stage shredded all year round.
Everybody looks, it's like watching porn and think every guy's got a big dick.
Yes.
Everybody's got a big dick.
Yeah. No, you're seeing a skewed perspective of the world. So first thing, yes, that's the way that the reticular activating system works. But on top of that as well, I think you can repurpose the story you tell yourself about pretty much almost anything. So there's this great example Sam Harris uses where he says, at the end of a workout, really tough cardio and weights workout, when your heart rate's at 190 and you're lying on the floor of the gym in a sweat angel and you're panting and you've got the taste of metal in the back of your throat and you're hot and sweat everywhere. And that sensation in and of itself is quite uncomfortable. And yet you're taking such cathartic, weird pleasure from this masochistic thing that you just did to yourself because of the story that you tell yourself. Now, if that exact same stimulus happened spontaneously while you were sat in traffic, you would think, I need to go to the hospital fucking immediately, right? What is happening to me? that tells us that the story that you tell yourself about why something is happening very much and maybe almost entirely is your experience of that thing.
Well, and what's the quote? The only difference between anxiety and excitement is breath. Fritz Perls, I think, said that they're the same neurological response in the body, but when you're excited, you're actually breathing. But when you're anxious, you quit breathing. But they're the same neurological response in the body. So yes, what we label things and the context we give things makes all the difference. And like you, yeah, I believe I believe anything is within our power to begin making adjustments. Now, I'll kind of throw out a kind of another part to this. I've never found anybody make a significant change from a place of shame or from hating on themselves. And I'll just give you an example. I tend to carry my weight in my belly. And I found that whenever, if I gain a little weight there, if I start just, every time I look in the mirror, I just hate on my belly. It doesn't go away. Never has gone away from hating on it. But if I focus on my chest a little bit, on my shoulders and arms a little bit, which I like better, and just kind of send love and think, how can I keep doing better? The belly takes care of itself. And a lot of people think the way to make significant change is to have significant shame wrapped around it or to hate on themselves. But the hating on yourself, how's that going to open you up to let good things happen, to let yourself change in positive ways, to let good things come to you?
Well, do you want to be around that person either? Like, is that the friend you want?
But so many people have that person up here in their head with them.
Of course. And, I'm speaking to myself here. I have a very scolding inner voice. It's very quick to judge. It's very quick to tell me when I've fallen short of these impossibly arbitrary high standards that no one else knows. So here's one thing that happens pretty frequently, I think, for me. And I know that Lex Friedman has the same issue. When you're speaking a sentence as a podcaster, you're very intimately connected with the texture of your mind, with the friction from what you're thinking to what you mean to say. And a lot of the time, you're trying to play this odd balance between getting out of your own way so that the words come out naturalistically, and also being sufficiently engaged so that you can craft the direction of where the sentence is going. And sometimes you forget a word, or you slightly misspeak, or you're imprecise with the way that you meant to describe something, or you use one term when you could have used a different one, or you pause in the wrong sort of place. And, this is my craft. This speaking thing is what I do. And I absolutely adore this level of this relationship I have with my verbal mind. And it's one of the things that I pride myself on the most. But it also means that when I start to fall short, if there is something where I just trip over a little rock ever so slightly. And that, to me, plays on my mind, because I think, well, this is where you should have been.
How you're constructing the next sentence.
Of course, which you then begin to spiral down from there. But here's the weird thing. Nobody else knows the sentence that you could have spoken. No one else knows. No one else knows the blog post you could have written. Nobody else knows the meal you could have cooked. Nobody else knows the chest press rep that you could have done. Only you will know about that. And I can see how for type B people with that, the lack of external scrutiny gives them the opportunity to do less and to kind of hide away. But for type A people, that gives them this sort of bizarre internal taskmaster that continues to whip them until they hit some impossibly high standard that nobody could ever meet in any case.
It's still not good enough.
Correct.
There's, that taskmaster doesn't, okay, I put the whip down. You achieved it.
Oh, you listened to that episode I did with Matthew Hussey, didn't you?
Yeah.
Yeah, so he has this great story where he's talking about how he starts each day basically in something similar to productivity debt. Oliver Berkman's got this phenomenal idea of productivity debt, that when he wakes up every morning, he imagines that he's somehow overdrawn in this contribution to his...
He starts the day overdrawn?
Yes, and that it is his job that by the end of the day, if he castigates and flagellates himself sufficiently, he may be able to get it back to zero. Like only zero, though. You can never be in
the 4,000 weeks guy we're talking
correct.
about.
Yeah, that's Oliver Berkman. And then this is Matthew Hussey's thing, which I think relates to it. I struggle to believe I'm worthy of moments of joy and peace without first putting myself through a brutal schedule, monitoring my productivity levels down to the minute. Perhaps some people apply this to earn your cookie mindset in ways that lead to healthy accomplishments. Not me. Mine is a mutation whereby joy and self-compassion are regularly outlawed by an internal tyrant who decides when I've been flogged enough for one day. Just when I'm about to collapse, a voice inside says, okay, give him half an hour of peace before bed, but make sure he knows we'll start again bright and early in the morning.
In debt.
In debt. Productivity debt.
In debt.
Yep.
Yeah. And you know, that's what I was talking about stepping outside the washing machine, right? When you're inside the washing machine, you don't know you're being spun by it. That's normal. That's life. It's just what is. But when you can step outside, as Matthew does in that example, he can be the observer of himself. And from there, something can shift. He can do something different. I love living in Mexico. I love that Mexican culture honors the siesta. I lay down at least 2, maybe 3 times a day, sometimes for 10, 15 minutes, sometimes for 30 minutes or an hour. And whether it's to put a little hot pack on my eyes or take a nap. And you know, I'm so much more productive. I can work from 7 in the morning till 10 at night and not feel drained or exhausted or driven just because I can build those little gaps in there to say, time to relax, time to recharge the battery. But here's the thought. Let's put a little different light on it. What's the best day of your life look like? Theoretically, our hard work. Theoretically, the stuff, you know, I launched a new company a year ago. It took me 2 years of building it before I launched it. You know, I bootstrapped it. I'm in debt over it. I worked from 7 a.m. till 9 o'clock at night. It has not paid me a paycheck yet. And I'm loving it. I'm having such a good time with it. So what's the best day of our life look like? Is it the day that this finally pays off, that it finally crosses this threshold, that you finally had that success with the event, you know, that I get to do, you know, an in-person podcast, you know, with somebody with a lot of followers? What's the best day of my life? And I don't think many of us, most of us even ask ourselves that question. What are we working towards? Isn't it theoretically towards the best day of our life? That on some day we'll have finished the work and we can rest, we can enjoy it, we can take pride in it, we can experience the fruits of our labor, we can share with our friends, we can dance, we can sing, we can have a good night's sleep, we can have sex, we can, you know, isn't that best day of our life? And I'm wondering, do we really have to work so hard to have the best day of our life? Can you and I get up today? And if you and I don't get up today with the intention of having the best day of our life, why not? When's that going to happen? Is it going to be tomorrow, this Saturday, next Saturday? You know, when the business starts making a profit, when you're over 5 million. Remember, 5,000 probably was a big deal, right?
A huge deal. Yeah.
And that you've broken 1 million, 2 million, 5 million, 50 million. Yeah. Will you be happy and have the best day of your life then? Not unless you get up every day and have some component of the best day of your life today.
What's that Seneca quote? How long are you going to wait until you start to demand the best for yourself?
It kind of goes back to making us a priority, doesn't it?
A lot of people continue to wait.